Yeah, welcome to part of In Church, where Brent Winters and I get together and chat about topics that we are interested in and feel important, and hopefully it'll key you on to urge you on to thinking too. So, In Church, check out Brent's website, commonlawyer.com. But go ahead, Brent. I think we're going to dig back into the Headnotes of Esther.
Yeah, this is the Headnotes of Esther. Thank you, Dan. This is the Headnotes of Esther, the Book of Esther in the Bible. And the longest headnote in the Winterized translation of the Bible is on the Book of Esther. And the reason for that is I just got to thinking that there are things here we need to discuss, because the Book of Esther is the beginning of the obscuring of the identity of true Israel, the true blood descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, then his son Isaac, and his grandson Jacob, and from Jacob, then he had 12 sons and the 12 tribes of Israel. That was the beginning of the nation Israel, and the law of God as given after that nation was formed and came out of Egypt. Moses was in a leadership position, and God gave to Moses the words of his law, his Torah, his precepts, his ordinances, his first principles, and all of those are there in the 5 books attributed to Moses. And yes, I don't just say attributed. No, Moses wrote those books. He was the penman that God poured his truth through Moses, preserving his personality, his vocabulary, his understanding. The writings are Moses' writings, but God poured his truth through Moses in such a way as to preserve him from error. And I say that, Montana Dan, on the testimony, the record of the testimony of Jesus Christ himself. That's my conclusion from what he has said. Well, through the centuries, this is reading from the headnote of the Book of Esther. Through the centuries, Judaism has treated this short book called Esther as a mere fun story, and in modern times presents it as a melodramatic play, complete with audience booing and hissing at the entry of the villain Haman on the stage. The message of Esther, however, ought not be so trivialized. The significance of its facts reaches forward into the gospel records of the New Testament, giving understanding of the genesis of that fiendish system of cabals Jesus Christ hated most, namely Judaism's brand of Babylonian religion, law, and government. The Babylonian code is opposed to the jury of judges, administrative minutia as opposed to first principles of God's law. And instead of retrospective law of the land, Judaism, the prototype of all false religion in the Bible, has the speculative administrative law of the city. Accordingly, Jesus Christ minced no words in cursing Judaism's bureaucrats for using the shenanigans of Babylon's administrative codes to dominate and abuse others. He said this, "Woe unto you also," I'm quoting from the Winterized version, "Woe unto you also, you law sharps, for you all laid men with burdens heavy to be borne, and you yourselves touched not the burdens with one of your fingers." That's Luke 11:46. Curiously, learned men still say the book Esther never mentions God. To be sure, neither God nor his name, Yehovah, he happens, meaning he happens, appears forthrightly. Due to no open mention of God in Esther, coupled with no evidence of saving trust in its leading figures, Esther and Mordecai, some reformers questioned, this has been the reformers of the Protestant religion, some reformers questioned Esther's canonicity, that is, whether the book is part of God's collection of airless, holy writs. Well, they eventually decided it was, but God and his name are, and for this reason, God and his name are none times embedded 5 times in the book's Hebrew phrases. God's name of creative might as lawgiver, Elohim, appears 1 time embedded in sovereign promise keeping. Yahoah, meaning he happens, appears 4 times. He happens, the personal name of God, Yahoah, appears 4 times. The name of God, stressing that he is lawgiver, final arbiter of right and wrong in individual instances from whose decision there is no appeal, appears once. Embedded in the text in a way that you have to look real close to see the spelling of those words. In each of these 5 instances, God uses an acrostic to weave his name into the ordered letter patterns of the Hebrew words. By this wordsmith's tool, God forged his name of raw strength and lawgiver, Elohim, into Esther chapter 7, verse 5, and his sovereign promise-keeping name, Yahoah, into Esther chapter 1, verse 20, chapter 5, verse 4, chapter 5, verse 13, and chapter 7, verse 7. But further, the two times a non-Israelite speaks the acrostic of God's name, the 2nd and 4th instances, the writer spells the Lord's name from left to right as the sons of Japheth. Well, who's the sons of Japheth? Well, that's the European. That's us. I mean, I assume I'm got a lot of European blood in me. But we write, us Europeans, we write from left to right. But the Hebrews and the Semitic speaking tongues, the Arabs, the Hebrews, the Israelites, they write from right to left. The Hebrew Bible is written, the lines run, the writing runs from right to left. You have to read that way. And by the way, this is just a side note, Dan. When you write Hebrew, you got to drag your hand over everything you write. See, that's the way a left-handed man does in English, and that's a problem for some people because, especially when we used to have fountain pens. You remember fountain pens, Dan? You had cartridge pens or fountain pens. You could suck the. If you're writing with one of those and you're having to drag your hand, you're left-handed, you're writing in English, you got to drag your hand all over that wet ink, and that'll smear it. That used to be a big problem. If you're right-handed, see, you're not doing it that way. You're starting on the left side. Well, at any rate, Hebrew is the other way around. But in these two cases, one time it's written the way Europeans write, and 2 times it's written the way an Israelite speaks. It's written coming from the other direction. The 1st and 3rd instances I cited above. The writer spells the Lord's name from right to left as the sons of Shem, the Semites, the Arabs, and the Hebrews. Right. Hence, the foremost purpose of the book Esther, reading from the footnote or the headnote to Esther in the Winterized version, the foremost purpose of the book Esther is not to exalt any trust or courage of those Jews that chose to remain in Babylon. Don't forget, this book is written about the Israelites back to the land of Israel, to not in faith return. These are, from all indications of the book Esther, Israelites that were completely Babylonian in their culture, had been there for decades, had abandoned faith in the true God, but God nonetheless, because of that, as he had promised in the law of Moses, will obscure their identity, and it begins right here. Let's keep reading. Hence, the foremost purpose of the book Esther is not to exalt any trust or courage of those Jews that chose to remain in Babylon. Why do I call them Jews? Judaism. Somebody says Jew, you're not talking about a specific race of men, because you don't know who they are, and they don't know either, because God promised that would happen in his law, and Esther is the pronounced beginning of that obscurity. And to know how that happened, you got to read the book. In fact, those Jews who are those lacking trust, having refused to return to Jerusalem with the trusty remnant of Ezra, having chosen instead the lucre to be gotten under the illusory promises of imperial protection from the horror of Babylon and her bastard children, namely the cities of the earth. And if you want to see where the Bible labels the cities of the earth, all the cities of the earth, as such, you can go to Deuteronomy 30, verses 1 through 5, Isaiah 1, 27 through 28, and Ezekiel 20, 39 through 42. And, of course, we know that in the book of Revelation, all the cities of the earth will be utterly destroyed. We see that. Well, instead of the Lord's promise of God's peace over Jerusalem, that is, his order of his kingdom, his delegated order, that's what shalom, peace, means. Just as Exodus tells of God's trustworthiness to Israel despite its faithlessness, Esther tells of God's faithfulness to the Babylonian Jews despite their faithlessness. God has recorded Esther not foremost respecting those Jews staying in Babylon, but respecting their descendants, whose identity God has now sealed in obscurity beyond their knowing, beyond anybody else's knowing, against the final day of Yahovah. He happens. Dan, do you have any comments, or what does this raise any questions in your mind that you would want answered, or are you still trying to process everything that's being said here?
Yes.
Yes? What is it?
Yeah, there's still processing, but I'm still wondering why God made the Jews, or the sons of Abraham, obscure. That it's a thought in the back of my mind.
Well, he says in the law of God that he being God, he knows everything. He says, you're going to abandon my will. Your natural desire to please your father, that's me, will go away. If you ever had it, maybe you never had it. And you will overstep my laws out of ignorance and then out of willfulness. And as a result, this is the consequence of not having a passion toward what I want, my will, as the sovereign. In other words, the will of the sovereign is law. And this is discipline to those that are my elect out of you, and punishment, terminal punishment. This is the beginning of your terminal punishment. That's what I understand it to be. Yeah. Well, let me read one more paragraph, and maybe that's enough for this time, and then you can follow us the next one when we do that. It's a long footnote or a long head note. In the meantime, one can make three observations. First, those calling themselves blood descendants of the man Jacob, later named Israel, are just as the rest of Adam's race. Without saving trust in Jesus Christ, none of them will be saved from the wrath to come. Second, the present gathering of those calling themselves Jews in the land called Palestine is a gathering of unbelief in Jesus Christ, and therefore is not the true gathering of which the Bible speaks. In Deuteronomy, again, chapter 31 through 5, Isaiah 1, 27 through 28, and Ezekiel 20, 39 through 42. Third, it behooves any in our day calling himself a Jew or Jewish, creating the impression that he is a blood descendant of the man Israel, to take heed of the needless danger into which that unnecessary claim puts him. That can be seen in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9. Bottom line, there is no everlasting advantage to one claiming one's blood descent from the man Israel, also called Jacob, especially since such claim is wholly unfounded, lacking even any bare smidgen of evidence, much less any respectable preponderance of evidence, further much less any clear and convincing evidence, or less yet any sure and conclusive evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. Indeed, for anyone to claim blood descent from the man Israel is mere speculation, and as such is barred from evidence at common law. Simply put, sin has leveled without exception every member of Adam's race, concluding all under sin's curse, hopeless and helpless without Jesus Christ. Accordingly, whether one is a Jew is no relevant question of fact now, nor will it be before the final judgment before Jesus Christ. This should drive home to us again that salvation is not by race, it is by grace. And if you ask someone who says he's Jewish, how do you know you're Jewish? They'll say, well, I grew up in the Jewish religion, the Jewish culture. My parents are Jewish. And you say, well, does that mean you're a descendant of Abraham and Isaac through Jacob? Yeah. Well, how do you know? Point to something. Well, I'm Jewish. Everybody knows. That's not evidence, friends. That's just political correctness. That's just like saying everybody knows that that the American tax dollars did not fund the lab in China that created COVID. Saying things are so don't make them so. And certainty is no test for certitude, and certitude is no test for certainty. Are you Jewish? I'm certain I am. That's not the test of truth, friends. That's just political correctness. Everybody's saying it, don't make it true. I want some evidence. Some, any. Dan, you've told me something about your ancestors, and I ask you about them because I want to know, and I find out that they're from places like Norway, and they landed in the United States and out west, and they wound up in Montana. And I know you feel confident about that, and I just told you about my great-grandmother, Mackenzie, and I have an idea where she was probably from, or her family, although I have no record of it, and I don't know. I just know what her name is, and that gives me a clue. And I have my other ancestors that way. But as an American, I know I'm all mixed up. I can look at all the names and my grandparents' names, and I'm from different kinds of people. But I can't say for sure we're any of them. I don't have a smidgen of evidence in most cases where their families came from and how they got here. Some evidence on one side with some of them, yes. But most of them I don't. And even though I think I know where they're from, just looking at their names and what little I can gather, I have no evidence. And so I don't say that I'm conclusively this or conclusively that because I flat don't know. And why would we believe people who say that I'm Jewish, I'm descended from Israel, when they can't produce a smidgen of evidence? We're talking about something the Bible prophesies about. The Bible says in the end times that God will raise up 144,000 Israelites from the 12 tribes, 12,000 from each tribe. Do I believe it? Well, does the Bible say it? Yeah, I believe it. I believe God knows who the people of Israel are. He knows where the descendants of Israel are. He knows them by name, but because he has said and predestined in his law, I will judge them. I will judge them for their lack of trust, and I will obscure their identity. They'll be a people without knowing who they are, and it'll be a miserable existence. So what makes us accept that other people who don't have any evidence will tell us what they are? Hey, they want to say that. That's okay with me. I didn't see that. I only heard. Just to be sociable, I'll take your word. I'm going to get along with people. So if the Jews say that, but on the other hand, if I want to say otherwise, I will, and I am saying otherwise. The Bible says that they don't know, and there is no evidence, and we need to look at it that way and not be caught up in support of people that don't have any evidence for what they're saying. And if they're going to get on the world stage and try to control the American government and get billions upon billions upon billions upon billions of dollars sent every day to them, well, no, I want to say that I don't believe that. If we're doing that on the basis that they're descended from Israel, I don't know that that's right. And that is what it comes down to, friends. They've whipped up the Christian community into supporting that with a passion. Our land is here. Our loyalty is here. Well, that's my take on it, Dan. What's yours? Well, this is Brent Allan Winters. This is Montana Dan, and we're the elders at In Church. Go to the website commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com.